Rise for the jury, please. An investigator, you go ahead and take your seat. Again, reminding you that you remain under oath. Thank you. You take your water up with you if you'd like. All right, thank you. Please be seated. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Cantu, during the break, I was just looking over my notes here, and I just wanted to circle back to Kelly Ray Dorr for a moment.
Okay.
Who was and is Kelly Ray Dorr?
Kelly Ray Dorr was an assistant manager in the meat department.
Where was he when the defendant came in and began firing east to west?
He was at basically the west doors, preparing to go out those west doors. So on the west end as the defendant was shooting from east to west.
And was he also in the line of fire from the defendant?
He was, yes.
And how were you able to make that determination?
Based on the video, the impacts, and the trajectory investigation.
And now I'm going to turn back to Mr. Ponsford and Mr. Roeder, if we may.
Okay.
And Your Honor, can we have the screen? Thank you. And I think I got ahead of myself in saying the defendant had returned heading west across the store. But is that about to happen here and what we're looking at?
Yes. So he'll continue to aisle 19 and then turn around and come back to the west.
And do you see that both in the video on the bottom right as well as the graphic on the left?
Yes.
And the red circle is tracking the defendant.
Yes.
And we see that gentleman on the right-hand side of the screen, and I'll go a little slower here, sorry. The lower right-hand side of that screen, who is that?
That's Mr. Roeder, Paul Roeder.
And what direction is he heading at this point?
He is walking north on aisle 17.
So north in terms of direction, but heading towards the front of the store.
Correct.
And is that reflected in the lime green dot on the graphic on the left?
It is, yes.
So from your review of the video evidence, did it seem clear the defendant saw Mr. Roeder a number of times
Yes,
and decided not to shoot and kill Mr. Roeder?
that's correct.
And after Mr. Roeder is seen on this security camera here on the bottom right of the screen, where does Mr. Roeder go?
He continues walking down to the front of the store from aisle 17, and then he eventually comes to that main east-west aisle, and he walks along the east-west aisle to the west, and I believe he ends up at register 10. He is there to check out.
And is this animation on the left, the graphic demonstrating that the defendant is about to cross paths with Mr. Ponsford again?
Yes,
And can you tell us what Mr. Ponsford is doing at this point?
he is back in the vestibule, but he's about to re-enter the store from that east entrance.
So this will be a second time he's coming in since the shooting began?
Correct.
And tell us a little bit more about what you learned from Mr. Ponsford from interviews and from the investigation.
We learned that Mr. Ponsford was intellectually and developmentally delayed, and he was dating Terry Laker, who was also intellectually and developmentally delayed.
And Mr. Ponsford's coming back in and Ricky Olds is right there by the east doors.
That's correct.
Bless you. And is that shown in this next graphic as I hit play?
Yes.
So what do we see in the bottom right hand of the screen?
Mr. Ponsford re-entering the store.
And what's on the top right hand of that screen?
As the defendant walks by, he again looks towards those east doors where Mr. Ponsford has just made entry.
And again, declines to shoot and kill Mr. Ponsford.
Correct.
Where does the defendant go from here?
He is going to continue to aisle 12, at which time he goes towards the back of the store. So south on aisle 12, to the back of the store.
What do we see in this still photograph from 2:32 p.m.?
This is the defendant walking back eastbound. He's about to cross that main entryway. He is east of East Checkout, and he is looking towards those east doors, and his rifle is in his right hand down by his side.
And how about here at 2:32:04?
He is looking as he is walking to the west along that east-west aisle. He's looking to the north side of the store, kind of northwest at this point.
What happens now?
Mr. Tatum comes back in the store from the west entrance, and the defendant, who is on aisle 12, something causes him to look towards the northwest, which is near where Mr. Tatum came in, and then he starts jogging towards the back of the store, which would be south on aisle 12.
And Mr. Tatum came back in that doorway, as he testified earlier today, to try to save people.
That's correct.
And the defendant appears to react around that same time and head towards the back of the store.
That's correct.
And on the left-hand side of the screen, what do we see in this graphic?
So the left-hand side of the screen shows the defendant on aisle 12, about mid-aisle, is the purple dot, which is all the way on the left side of the screen. You can see Mr. Tatum, who is on the right-hand, bottom right corner of the diagram. He has just entered this west door, which is down here.
What do we see on the left-hand side of the screen here?
So this is the deli. This is the diagram of the deli area. And this is at 2:30:47. So this is a couple minutes before.
Okay. What's on the screen at this point?
This is people running out of that west emergency door, and we just saw Alon Shakti fall.
And this is the point at which Mr. Tatum is going to help Ms. Shakti up.
Correct.
Sorry. So when Mr. Tatum came back in the store, what direction did he go?
He ends up running eventually south, but he kind of skirts the deli and kind of goes around all of the produce section. But he ends up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, which is the southwest corner of the store.
And what do we see on the right-hand top corner of the screen there?
There's a circle around the defendant who has his rifle raised, and he is aiming and appears to be sighting down, which would to the west.
And who was there at that point in time that the defendant would have been sighting on?
Mr. Tatum has just run past there and is at the door to the cooler area of the meat and seafood department.
And was there also evidence of bullet strikes from behind where Mr. Tatum had been at that point in time?
Yes, there were.
And from that, what did you conclude?
That the defendant shot at toward Mr. Tatum.
What do we see now?
So Mr. Tatum has already gone through the store. The defendant then drops his weapon, and he is going to continue walking westbound along that south aisle of the store.
Take a step back here and tell us what we have going on in the store at this point in time.
So this is, again, this is now 2:34, so it's a few minutes later. Mr. Roeder on the diagram has made his way up to the check stand And he is around aisle 9, which is about check stand 12. Kahendra is now on the east side of check stand 12. Patrick Cruz is still in the same position on aisle check stand 9. The defendant is at aisle 4. He's going to start walking this way and then divert around or through this display and end up on aisle 3. But in this picture on the right-hand side, you can see that he is looking to the east where Mr. Roeder is.
So the top right-hand picture is the defendant looking to the left or to the east,
Correct.
and that's represented by the purple dot we have on the left-hand graphic.
Correct.
And Mr. Roeder is out in the open on that aisle going east to west.
Correct.
And what do we have in the bottom right-hand screen?
This is Mr. Cruz at check stand 9, just in the position where he laid down.
Based on your review of the video, what is the defendant doing at this point?
Looking for people.
And where is he moving?
He's moving to the south end of the store, or the back of the store.
On what aisle?
Aisle 3.
And what time is it now?
It's 2:34:39.
Approximately how long since the first shots were fired? Let's assume it was 2:30.
So it's been about almost 5 minutes at this point.
And the clip I just let run through, he's walking in what direction?
He's walking on the south aisle to the east.
And what is he doing as he's passing each aisle?
He's looking up and down the aisle,
What did you conclude from that?
that he was looking for people.
What happens then, Investigator Cantu?
At aisle 10, he stops, raises the rifle, and aims down the aisle, and shoots down the aisle. And we later, so there's no video on aisle 10, but we later find Suzanne Fountain's body in about mid-aisle, aisle 10.
How old was Suzanne Fountain?
She was 59.
How many times was she hit by the defendant's gunfire?
3.
And what happened as a result of her getting hit by gunfire?
She was killed.
And what happened in terms of the impact of the bullets on her body physically?
They went through her body, and then debris from the gunshots can be seen at the north end of the store. So this is check stand 13, and there's debris on the floor as a result of the shots fired. We also found her body tissue near the register area.
And that was also collected as part of the investigation.
That's correct.
What else? Because we don't have, well, let me back up one step. Do we have camera view of aisle 10?
We do not.
So can you just describe for the jury what aisle 10 looked like in terms of what else was in the aisle?
So there were cardboard display cases with snacks. I think they were like fruit snacks on the aisle. There were at least 2 of those cardboard displays spaced out on the aisle.
Had you, in reviewing the video from prior to this moment, seen the defendant go past aisle 10 earlier?
Yes.
And had he looked down aisle 10?
Yes.
Did he fire a shot when he looked down aisle 10 earlier?
He did not.
So based on your review of all the video and all the evidence, what did you conclude about that?
That Suzanne Fountain came out of a hiding spot and she was now visible on his third pass of aisle 10.
What does this still photo depict?
This is the defendant in the white circle with his weapon shouldered and aimed down aisle 10.
And by aimed, you mean he's looking down the sight, aiming the gun
Yes.
in the direction of Suzanne Fountain.
Yes.
Okay. And do we have more slides to go through with the jury later on in the trial?
We do, yes.
All right, so I'm going to switch gears at this point, though, and ask you a few questions, okay?
Okay.
Anyone injured in the mass shooting?
Other than Alan Shakti, no.
Okay. What was Alan Shakti, or how was she injured?
She was injured running, trying to get away.
And were you able to obtain her medical records?
Yes.
How'd you go about doing that?
Ms. Shakti signed a medical release form allowing us to obtain them. I then forwarded that to Boulder Community Health, where she was seen, and I requested the records. I got a physical copy of the records and an electronic copy of the records. And I also obtained a certification from the manager of the records department to confirm that the records I received were a full and complete set of the records that they had on file for Ms. Shakti.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Do you recognize those, Investigator Cantu?
I do, yes.
What do you recognize those to be?
This is a paper version of the medical records I received from Boulder Community Health, as well as the attestation from the custodian of records.
And that's a certification from the custodian of records?
Correct.
And this with regards to Ms. Shakti's medical treatment following this incident?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, people move to admit People's 52 into evidence.
No objection. Admitted.
When was she first treated at Boulder Community Hospital?
On March 22nd, 2021, at about 8 p.m., 9 p.m. in the evening.
So later that same day after the mass shooting.
Correct.
And what was the diagnosis from the doctors on March 22nd, 2021?
A traumatic compression fracture of the T6 thoracic vertebra.
And does the medical record also contain an explanation from the patient on how the injury may have been caused?
Yes.
And what is the explanation provided specifically on page 3 of the medical records from Ms. Shakti?
So it says a fall. Patient sustained a mechanical slip and fall today at around 2:30, denies hitting head or losing consciousness.
And later on in the medical record, specifically on page 6, does it provide more detail on what caused the fall, specifically that it was during a shooting at King Soopers?
Yes.
And on page 21 are the discharge instructions from Ms. Shakti informing her not only of the injury, but that she has to wear a brace going forward.
Yes.
Does she go back to Boulder Community Hospital on March 26th and then again on April 23rd for follow-up treatment in connection with this injury?
She does. Yes.
And are those records there as well?
Yes.
Do those visits and all the treatment and x-rays she received then confirm that she has a fracture of her T5 and T6?
Yes.
Thank you. Going to switch gears on you again if we can.
Okay.
You had mentioned that the shooter, the defendant, appeared to be looking for people when he encountered Suzanne Fountain.
Yes.
Based on your investigation, as well as your review of all the video evidence, were others hiding inside the store at that time?
Yes.
Where were they hiding, Investigator Cantu?
There were people in the clinic area of the pharmacy. There were people in the pharmacy behind the shelves. There were several people upstairs in the offices and employee break area. There were people in a click list room. There were people in the shelves. There were people in the office above the deli where they keep the Starbucks the extra cups and stuff. There were people hiding in the semi-trailers in the back of the store. And there were people hiding in the Starbucks kiosk.
Were some of those people making 911 calls during that time period?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury how 911 calls work in terms of someone from the supermarket calls 911? What's actually happening during that phone call?
So when the call comes in, there's a recording of it. The recording actually starts a few seconds before the call taker picks up. But the call taker is going to take in the information and they're going to type it into CAD or computer aided dispatch. That information is then going to be aired to officers or whoever the information is for, whether it's fire, police, whomever. They're going to air that over the radio system. So there's the call takers and then there's the dispatcher who's working the radio.
And is that done to get the word out as quickly as possible to officers and first responders?
It is, yes.
So would that explain why, if we're listening, for example, to the 911 call that Logan Smith made, why we hear that typing in the background?
Yes.
And what is that typing actually resulting in?
That typing is the call taking dispatcher updating the information that he's receiving into CAD so that everybody can see what's going on.
And did you have an opportunity to listen to the 911 calls in connection with this mass shooting?
I did, yes.
How would you describe the tone and demeanor of the people calling 911?
Panicked, afraid. Not really sure. Some people didn't know what they were seeing. That's how I would identify that.
And generally speaking, what information did the police have as they began to respond to King Soopers on March 22nd?
The information was that there were between 1 and 3 shooters, that there was a long gun or rifle, AK-47, some weapon of that sort being used, that the shooter had a bulletproof vest. I believe it was the shooter was described as a white male with a beard and chubby. Some of the information was that the individual was heading towards Broadway. We heard information that they were going to the Piggly Wiggly or the grocery store.
So multiple locations being given,
Correct.
armored vest of some kind,
Correct.
1 to 3 active shooters,
Correct.
and some kind of, you said long gun for those that don't use guns on a regular basis. What do you mean by a long gun?
So a rifle, not a handgun.
And some callers specifically referenced an AK-47.
That's correct.
Any 911 calls made in the first 33 seconds when the defendant was in the parking lot killing Nevin, Kevin, and Trelona?
No.
And once he went inside, did people start calling 911?
Yes. The first calls came in once he came in the store.
What did the dispatchers do with those calls?
They took that information. They gave information to the callers about how to be safe. They gathered as much information as they could. There were a lot of calls that were coming in, so they were in a hurry to get as much information as they could while sending help. But moving on to the next people to make sure that they got all the calls in.
So practically speaking, what does that mean? Let's say it's the 5th 911 call coming in from King Soopers. What's happening in that phone call?
In that phone call, it's generally going to be, are you calling about the shooting? And then like, are you safe? Get safe. We've got help on the way.
And were police, in fact, on the way at that point?
Yes.
Based on your investigation, where was Officer Eric Talley when the calls first started coming in?
He was at the Boulder Police Department.
And what information did he receive over the radio while at the Boulder Police Department?
He heard tones. So a tone is an alert that a dispatcher plays to let you know that something big is happening. It's an attention getter. So the tones were played. And then the dispatcher advised that there was an active shooter in the location of 3600 Table Mesa at the King Soopers. The information that came in, which was 1 to 3 shooters with a rifle, with body armor, all was relayed to the officers responding to the scene, including Officer Talley.
And what did Officer Talley do after receiving that information?
He responded emergency. So he flipped on his lights and sirens and began traveling very, very fast without delay to the scene from the police department.
And you mentioned earlier dash cam video. Did Officer Talley's car have dash cam video in it?
It did, yes.
And how does the dash cam video work?
So the dash cam can be activated manually, but when you, it automatically gets activated when lights and sirens are flipped on, or if you go over a certain speed. I believe at the time it was 55 miles an hour. His was activated when he activated his overhead lights and sirens.
What happens or what happened after video from a dash cam is completed? Where is it sent and what is done with it?
So for the dash cam footage, when the car pulls back into the parking lot, that's when the upload happens to the cloud. It's a secured cloud-based system that is hosted by, in Boulder PD's case, Axon. And it is reserved there. We can go through. Officer Talley was attached to the call, meaning the dispatchers put him on the call. So all of the information with the case number, the location, all of that information is automatically tagged on to his footage for that call. If not, if he wouldn't have been dispatched to that call and just responded, someone would have had to put that information in manually after the video was uploaded.
And is that then sent, when you say uploaded, to a secure provider?
Yes.
Is it capable of being edited or altered?
Not on the system. There are audit trails that show who has viewed it. We can clip things. If there's something that important happens, we can make notes of it. We can add notes. All of that is detailed in the audit trails, but the actual video doesn't change.
So even if someone after the King Soopers incident that night just wanted to watch it, that's recorded in the audit trail that the system maintains as part of their security.
That's correct.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, sir.
Showing you what's been previously marked as people's 53 for identification. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
This is Officer Talley's dash cam video from when he activated his sirens until about 5 minutes and 5 seconds into the video. So it's about 6 minutes into the video, he activated his camera at 1 minute. And it is his response to the scene, and then from the car, what occurs while he is in scene.
How do you know that that's the same video recording?
Because after I watched it, I signed it and dated it.
And does that exhibit 53, accurately record and display what Officer Talley's dash cam video captured that day?
It does, yes.
You know, at this time, people move to admit people's 53 into evidence.
No objection. Submitted.
And then one other question, you mentioned that it stops at around the 6-minute mark or so.
Yes.
Did his dash cam video continue recording for the hours that it was in the King Soopers parking lot?
Yeah, this is a clip of the entire long video.
And this clip captures what?
It captures his response. So when you activate those body cam or in-car cameras, it actually buffers, so it takes you back a minute. So that's why this video starts at 1, because the minute before is before he knows about this call. So at 1 minute, he is advised of this call. He activates his lights and siren. It's his response to the scene, the route he takes to get there, when he arrives on scene, and then as he parks his car, what is in view of the dash cam, and then his radio is on in his car, so it captures what is aired over the radio.
Thank you. I'm going to break that down a little bit if we can.
Okay.
The body-worn cameras work basically the same way.
Yes.
So officer has his or her body-worn camera on, but when they turn it on, let me back up one step. It's actually recording all day, every day.
Correct.
But that recording is only being captured and sent to the secure provider when something triggers it to be actually activated.
Correct.
So if an officer hits on it's going to record the last 30 seconds or a minute, depending on the system that they have of what was happening before that.
Correct.
And is that how you just described the dash cam video working?
Yes.
Veronica, I'm going to publish 53 in just a moment if I can have the screen. You mentioned the radio is on in Officer Talley's car. What are some of the things that we're going to hear over the radio during this recording?
You're going to hear that there's an active shooter at King Supers. You're going to hear the descriptions as I described. You're going to hear when officers arrive what they see, which is there's a body down that doesn't match the suspect description. And then you're going to hear about a second body. And then you're going to hear that officers are going to make entry into the store and that shots were fired at them.
What's the significance of bodies being down but not matching the description of the suspect?
So there are people that are down and not moving, but it's not the suspect. We're still looking for someone. This is not the individual that has been described that we should be looking for.
And at some point, are the voices over the radio voices of officers who are actually on scene?
Yes,
And they're communicating that there are bodies actually down in the parking lot,
that's correct.
that this is not a hoax or a swatting incident of any kind.
Exactly.
And when Officer Talley gets out of his car and runs in, will the dash cam video continue recording?
Yes.
And the shots that we hear referenced in the radio call are the shots when Officer Talley's inside the store.
That's correct.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'll publish 53.
Yes, sir.
Don't block me off. What are you doing? Report that the person is wearing an armor vest, 5'8", heavy. Down. The people down to the floor that's on that picture. I'll come on to the What's the name of the for your truck? A 33. Not 10%, but what's the name? I just had another party that's upstairs, second floor doing shots. Copy. So for 12-4 and 95 are making entry. Unit full traffic. Copy. Party down next door. Copy. Active shooter inside. Shot at them twice.
Couple follow-up questions for you.
Okay.
Whose body is laying on the right-hand side of the screen?
That's Kevin Mahoney.
And whose body and car appear in front of Officer Talley's patrol vehicle?
Trelana Bartoviak.
And where specifically is her body on that picture investigator can't see?
So it's just behind the stop sign on the ramp.
Indicating towards the left-hand side of the picture heading up the pedestrian ramp.
Correct.
And that's the RAV4, the car being driven by Trelona that you described earlier.
Correct.
There was a voice saying party down inside the doors. Did you recognize that voice?
I did.
Who was the person radioing that?
That's Officer Pam Gignac.
Have you worked with Officer Gignac over the years?
Yes.
For approximately how long?
My entire career.
And as she's radioing this, based on where she is, whose body do you believe she saw?
Ricky Olds.
And she's saying that aloud while inside the store.
Correct.
After she says that, the dispatcher says, hold traffic. Can you explain to the jury what that means when a dispatcher says hold traffic?
So she had aired before they made entry. She said, Capo, Talley, and I are going in. That means Officer Talley, and Officer Capobianco were making entry into the store. That's when the dispatcher said, hold traffic. That means that this is a serious situation. We don't need to hear about traffic stops. We don't need to hear you're en route. This is the most important information, and we need to leave the air open for them to get any new information out.
In other words, cease all non-critical radio communications.
Exactly.
And then the next radio communication is Officer Gignac saying, shot at us twice.
Correct.
And what was happening inside at that moment in time based on your review of everything?
The defendant fired at the defendant fired at, shot and killed Eric Talley.
Brenna, may I approach?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Understanding you what's been previously marked as people's 63 for identification. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
This is Officer Bianco's body cam footage from approximately 1 minute. So after it was activated to 8 minutes into the very long clip from the day.
And same kind of questions that I asked you earlier about the dash cam. Is the body worn camera recording sent to the secure provider?
It is, yes.
And is it possible for it to be edited or altered without leaving a trail?
No,
And for every body worn camera recording using the Axon system, is there an audit trail provided?
yes, there is.
And does that video clip, is that a fair, in fact, exact recording from Officer Capobianco's body worn camera that day?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time, people move to admit people 63 into evidence.
No objection. Admitted.
And I'm going to have you testify later in the trial. But are you aware, Investigator Cantu, that there are police officers and civilians who do not want to watch the video unless they absolutely have to?
I am, yes.
And would that include Officer Capobianco?
Yes.
One last exhibit for you for today, Investigator Cantu.
Okay.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I've handed you what's been previously marked as people 64 for identification.
Yes.
What is contained on people's 64?
So this is a video compilation of the shooter's actions that day that was made by the FBI from surveillance footage that was gathered from the scene. This is I believe it's an 8-minute video of the defendant's movements throughout the day.
And does it include different camera angles than the other exhibit that we've already introduced and started walking the jury through?
It does, yes.
Including, for example, Trelona Barkowiak being shot point blank?
Yes.
Okay. And if you had a chance to review that 8-minute video in conjunction with everything else you've done in the case?
I have, yes.
And does it appear to be a fair, accurate, in fact, exact copy of the recordings that were taken from King Soopers that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, people move 64 into evidence.
May we approach? Yes, ma'am. Objections overruled.
So two final questions for you for today, Investigator Cantu.
Okay,
Exhibit 64 has been admitted, but we're going to watch that later on in the trial, okay?
okay.
How many civilians, and by civilians, I mean non-law enforcement, did the defendant shoot at after the Boulder Police Department made entry?
None.
And the first three officers inside King Supers were whom?
Officer Talley, Officer Brian Capobianco, and Officer Pam Gignac.
Your Honor, I have nothing further for Investigator Cantu at this point, but I will seek to call her later in the trial.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
You may step down. Oh, sorry.
I do not have any questions at this time for Investigator Cantu.
Understood. Thank you. You may step down. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the people call Officer Brian Capobianco to the stand. John, I'm sorry. Actually, we had a victim witness show up out of order, so if I can call Nicholas Edwards instead of Officer Capobianco.
Yes, Nicholas Edwards. Let's follow Mr. Dougherty around there. Mr. Dougherty, would you like to retrieve the exhibits while Mr. Edwards goes around?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. We'll stop right there. Mr. Edwards, I'm going to swear you in.
Sure.
Face me if you would, please, and raise your right hand. Good. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that in the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but.
I swear.
Okay, thank you. Have a seat. Get real close to that microphone and you may adjust it so that everyone can hear you.
Hello.
Hello, sir. How are you today?
Doing good.
Can you please state your full name, spelling your last name for the court reporter?
My full name is Nicholas J. Edwards, EDWARDS.
So, Mr. Edwards, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about your background, and then we're going to talk about what happened to you on March 22nd, 2021, okay?
Okay.
Where'd you grow up, sir?
I grew up in Pueblo, Colorado, mostly. And then I moved out of Pueblo, Colorado in 2016 up to Maryland, Colorado. And then I basically lived up north in this part of Colorado since 2016.
And what's your mom's name?
Sarah Moonshadow.
Where do you currently live, Mr. Edwards?
I currently live in South Boulder, right off of like Table Mesa on Osage Drive.
How long have you been living there for?
Yeah, I've been living there like maybe 2 months now.
Where were you living before that?
So before that, I was like before that I was like I was basically homeless. So I moved back up here last fall.
To Boulder.
Yes. And I've been up here since last fall.
Okay.
I've been homeless since that time. I just recently got into the apartment 2 months ago.
Right. And you said back here, you lived in Boulder previously?
Yeah, back from 2016 all the way up until 2021 when the mass shooting happened. And then I moved down south to Walsenburg, Colorado. And I stayed down there for a little bit, up until, basically 2023. Yeah. Last fall.
Okay. Thank you. Can I ask you a few questions about March 22nd, 2021?
Yes, sir.
Before the mass shooting at King Supers that you referenced, what were you doing during the course of that day?
Mostly we went to go do laundry initially. From the laundromat, we went over to the King Supers. We drove our vehicle there when we could have just walked, but we drove our vehicle there. And we went inside to go get like a few things. It wasn't even a grocery shop. It was just mostly stuff to like munchies. And then and then all that extra stuff happened.
Okay. And we're going to talk about that stuff in a moment. Okay.
Mhm.
Who were you at the laundromat with that day?
My mother, Sarah.
And had you ever been to that King Supers before?
Oh yes, I've been to that King Supers several times.
And you mentioned that you drove there instead of walking. Where'd you park when you went to King Supers?
We parked in that. There's two entrances at that King Supers. We parked on the left side, closest to that door where he came in from.
And by the door he came in from, you mean the shooter?
Yes, I do.
What'd you, it's okay.
That's good.
I'm going to go question by question and ask you to just walk the jury through everything you remember from that day, okay? When you and your mom went to King Supers, what'd you guys do when you first went in the store?
We went in. I don't even think we grabbed a shop. We grabbed, I don't even. We had one of those little handheld baskets. We weren't even there for very much.
You recall getting tea and strawberries and some other small items?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like strawberries, tea, and probably a few other things. I think she got one of those coffee cartons. It says Delight on it. But we were in that store for like 20 minutes maybe.
And at the end of that time, inside of King Supers, which way were you heading to go out of the store?
Let's see, so we went in on the east end. We basically made a loop, that the left side of the building, the east, and then we went in, we made a loop, came around to this other side. It took about 20 minutes. Because I think usually they keep all that coffee stuff and all the ice drinks and stuff like teas on the left side. Walked in, went around. It was about 20 minutes. What was the question?
You answered it.
Oh, okay.
Did you end up at the self-checkout on the west side?
Yes. Yeah, that's where we were at.
What happened when you were at the self-checkout on the west side?
So my mother, we were on that west end side. She had a uh she shit. She was like, having one of those out loud thoughts. And when we were standing there and outside, I heard like three separate distinct, what I didn't know at the time, I didn't know it was gunshots.
Where were those sounds coming from?
They were coming from outside initially. And then the guy came inside after those three shots, and he let off one shot inside the King Supers. And after that, everybody had went silent. And everybody went silent. And then I heard one lady scream, and then I heard three more gunshots. And then I locked up, and I couldn't get out of there. And my mom's are like, well, shit, we need to move now. We need to get out of here now.
Can I stop you for a second? Where were the shots coming from?
So like, if I was on the west end, it was coming from the east end.
And you heard one shot from inside, and then it sounds like a pause, and then more shots being fired.
Yes.
And you shared with us, and as you're telling this story, let me just ask you this. Can you picture this in your mind as you're telling the jury what happened?
Yeah, like, uh, uh, yeah, it was a picture in my mind. From what a picture in my mind. Yeah. I'm talking about it, from recalling it. Uh,
Can I ask you another question?
yes, sir.
You said you locked up. What do you mean by locked up?
I mean, like, paralyzed with fear from that first shot, and when the woman screamed, and when that registered, yeah, that fucked me up. And I locked up, and I noted I'm pretty sure that there were gunshots in my direction. I don't know. I locked up at an angle, and I thought the guy was over here. And my mom, when she said, and like, and during that entire time, she's all, there's like gunshots and percussions, and I fucking don't know what's going on. And she said, she's all like, we need to go, and from here, where I thought the guy was, and I turn around, and I run out the door, but yeah, that's a very scary situation to be in.
I have a couple follow-up questions for you, okay? You mentioned remembering the register. What about the register stands out in your memory?
I, yeah, because I locked up like this, and adjacent to the left side where I thought I saw the individual, I mean, was I don't know.
Did you continue to hear shots during that time?
Yeah, more than enough. He shot like 12 people, right? And
Judge,
shot down.
Sharon was
Right?
There's an objection. Just a minute, Mr. Edwards.
So I'll rephrase it.
Thank you. It's sustained.
So one of the things we need to do together, Mr. Edwards, is I'm going to ask you questions just to have you explain what you remember to the jury. And if the question doesn't make sense, let me know, because that happens at times. But if it makes sense to you, just answer the question if you can, okay? Did you hear gunshots continuing as you and your mom were crouching down there?
Yes, sir. Several.
Okay.
Several while I was standing up. Yeah. And then I turned around, and when I was running out the door, I don't know if I heard any more or not. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah, because it was like, because there was 3 shots outside. He walks in, and then it was 1 shot, and then everybody went silent. And then there was more shots as I was standing there. And then briefly, I'm pretty sure he had to reload because there was no more shots fired. And that's when my mom told me we need to get out of there. And then I turned, and then that's when I heard a few more shots as my mom was telling me that we need to leave. He reloads, and he's like, and then he sends more down range, and that's from what I recall.
Okay.
So yeah, there were shots fired, and
What could,
directions.
sorry. What could you smell?
Gunpowder. Burning gunpowder, burnt gunpowder. Gunpowder, yeah.
How did you and your mom get out of the store, Mr. Edwards?
We, uh, I had to, I turned to my left side after my mom had told after my mom had told me that we need to get out of the store. And I ran out the door because there's a door like this and then there's a door like that. So we ran out the doors and we ran through the parking lot and yeah, that's how we got out of the store.
You mentioned earlier that you thought the shooter was firing at you and you're feeling percussions.
Yes.
What do you mean by percussions?
I mean, as like the bullets are flying by, you feel like percussions of the waves. There's like would be the best way of describing them. Like a blast of air that hits you whenever you open a door. And as the bullets are flying by, I say flying by, but I don't know which way they're going. I feel like they're going down this way towards me because he's shooting in that direction. Or I think. And so it's like I don't know, but because of the positioning that I was at, because I was more or less like this, the self checkouts like this, and where the guy walked in from, like, and I locked up, and I couldn't tell. I don't know what the hell was happening, but I swear that there was all kind of, I don't know.
Okay. With the court's permission, I'm going to ask you to take a look at Exhibit 28, okay? May I approach on it?
Yes, sir.
That's been previously marked as people's 28 for identification. Do you recognize that photograph, Mr. Edwards?
Yes, sir.
What is it a photograph of?
Well, it's a photograph of me and my mother, and that would be I think that would be the individual. That looks like a.
And does that photo fairly and accurately depict where you and your mom were in this self-checkout area when this was happening?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, the people would move to admit people's 28 into evidence, please.
No objection. Admitted.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Edwards, what that means is the jury can now see the picture on the screen behind you.
Yes.
So you can look at that or you can look at the one in front of you, whatever is most comfortable for you. And just tell us what we see in this photograph and what's going on at this moment. I can ask it this way, actually. Where's your mom in this photograph?
Right there. She's
On-
in a green jacket. That's what she was wearing that day. And I believe that, well, I say I believe, well, that's me in the jacket. I believe I was wearing a Carhartt that day. But yeah, that's me there on the floor. And that's my mother there in the corner. Exactly how I remember it too, when she told me, when my mother told me that we need to get out of the store because she had me by my jacket. She grabbed me. She's oh, we need to get out of the store, and she turns and she runs, and
Take your time, sir.
So yeah, and she turns and she runs, and I drop down to the floor. And as I do that, as I drop down to the floor, I look up and I see my mother, and I only see her back, and she's running out the door. I'm like, oh shit. Eh. Oh, that's fucking wild shit.
Do you need a cup of water, Mr. Edwards?
No, I think I'm all right on water.
I only have a few more questions for you. Can I ask you those questions, or do you think you need a break?
No, I'm good.
You sure?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you looked at the photograph
Yes.
on the witness stand a couple moments ago, one of the things you said was, damn. Did you realize how close the shooter was to you and your mom?
No.
Okay. And we last met a couple weeks ago. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And did I show you just a really short video clip to help get you oriented to where you were and what was happening?
Yes, sir.
And was that the first time you realized how close the defendant, the shooter, was to you?
Yes.
We're going to transition now to talk a little bit about, as you're leaving the store, did you stay on all fours or did you get up?
No, as I was leaving the store, I stayed on all fours until I got all the way out of the store, and that was, I mean, that was pretty, shit, I don't even know. I'm surprised I made it out of there because, like I said, I'm sure you guys know, it's the first set of sliding doors and then the second set of sliding doors, and I was crawling on all fours until I got to the second set. And and by the time I got to the second set of doors, I stood up. There was a cart right there, and I ran around the left side of it, and I ran all the way out into the parking lot with my mother, and we got out there to the parking lot, and
Can I stop you there for a second?
yes, sir.
So do you remember crawling on the concrete to get out of there?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you got outside, did you and or your mom see the body of another victim outside?
Yes, sir.
What'd your mom do?
She said that she wanted to go. She wanted to go over to try to help the individual that was laying on the floor, but I grabbed her and I said, I don't think there's anything that we could do. When Officer Talley showed up and we were still in the parking lot, and he ran in and then there were like 6 more squad cars that pulled up, and they told us to go across the street at that point. We had pretty much made it out of there when that second group, because when the group of squad cars showed up and they told us to get out of there. That's when we left. My mom tried to help an individual who, like I said, was no longer, I don't think he was with us at that point. It was like laying there in the middle of the street at that T section right in front of the King Supers. So it's like, yeah, that's what I recall.
Okay. What has been the impact on you of all this, Mr. Edwards?
The impact. I don't, psychological, uh, uh, mostly, I would say.
It's fair. I'm not going to ask you to explain it in more detail, but just fair to say and I think we're seeing it, really impacted you.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Edwards, I appreciate you being here and you sharing with the jury what happened on March 22nd, 2021. So thank you very much, sir. Your Honor, I have nothing further for Mr. Edwards.
Judge, I have no questions.
Mr. Edwards, you may go and you're released from your subpoena.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, people call Officer Brian Capobianco to the stand.
Okay, thank you. If you may, yes, you may. Thank you. Good afternoon, officer. If you'll please come towards me and then go around your left. Make your way up to the witness stand. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that any testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Whenever you're ready, Mr. Garrity.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please state your full name, spelling your last name for the record?
Brian Capobianco. Last is Capobianco.
I'm going to ask you a few questions about your background and your career experience, and then talk to you about what happened on March 22nd, 2021, okay?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury when you first started working in law enforcement, please?
January of 2018 is when I started.
Where did you begin?
What agency?
Yes, sir.
Boulder Police Department.
What prompted you to become a police officer?
I don't know, whatever prompts a career changer at age 30, I guess. Restlessness, but just want to do something different, more important.
What had you been doing before that?
I worked in construction management.
How long did you work in construction management for?
About 6 years.
And where was that?
New York City area.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up on Long Island, New York.
What brought you to the state of Colorado?
I like it here.
Okay.
Nothing in particular, but
I think that story sounds familiar to a lot of us.
yeah, more and more.
When did you move to the great state of Colorado?
I believe it was the day after Christmas 2017 and started the academy day after New Year's, I believe. So
And do you have family still living on Long Island?
I do.
That includes your father?
Yes.
And did he fly in to support you today?
Yes, he's here.
And are you married?
I am.
What's your wife's name?
Victoria.
And during your time with Boulder Police Department, can you just walk us through what your career path has been and what's that involved?
Sure. I started off as everybody else does, as a patrol officer, street patrol officer. I've had a number of collateral duties, including UAS or drone. I was on the SWAT team for a short time. I was a training officer, which was probably my favorite of all, and street sergeant, which is what I currently am.
What is a training officer?
So basically, after officers get out of the regional academy, they come back to home department and they undergo field training, and they're assigned with a field training officer who basically walks them through the day-to-day of how to do the job. So,
What was your role on March 22nd of 2021 with the Boulder Police Department?
I was on patrol. I was a patrol officer.
What does that involve?
In a general sense, responding to calls for service, dispatch calls for service, some proactive foot patrol, things like that.
What shift were you working on March 22nd?
Day shift.
Can you just tell the jury, to the best of your recollection, what was the day like leading up to 2:00, 2:30 that afternoon?
Unmemorable, fairly innocuous as most days are. Routine calls for patrol, nothing remarkable.
So you say fairly innocuous, routine patrol. What does that mean to a police officer?
I guess it's relative. We deal with a lot of welfare checks, trespassing sorts of calls, kind of things of that nature, maybe a cold theft, nothing that really sticks out because it's something that we do pretty much every day.
It's your job.
It's our job.
You mentioned, can I ask you a couple questions? Follow up on what you said. You mentioned a cold theft. Can you explain to the jury what that means in law enforcement terms?
Sure. We basically categorize calls based on level of priority. We basically do that by saying a call is either cold, meaning it happened sometime in the past and there's no present danger. A call just occurred, which means that it occurred sometime in the very recent past. Or a call is in progress, which means it is occurring presently, which would be the highest priority.
So what would an example of a cold theft be?
Maybe a shoplift from a half an hour to an hour ago, where the clerk maybe just got around to calling us or something like that, maybe a little knick-knack or something.
How long had you been working that shift, those times by March 22nd of 2021?
So we change shifts every year in January. So at that point, it had been going on about 3 months.
What were you wearing that day?
Standard patrol uniform, which looks a little bit different from this. This is a Class A uniform. Our patrol uniform, it would be a similar color scheme patches, except there would be an outer carrier instead of an inner carrier. So I'm sure you've seen a outer vest with all of our tools attached to it.
And at approximately 2:25, 2:30, did a call come over the radio?
Yes.
Okay. What were you doing at that point in time before you got the call?
So I was at the, we have a downtown annex, which is at 16th and Pearl. Usually I would end my days there doing mostly paperwork, catching up on reports. Usually there were other officers there, so we would kind of sit and chat and do paperwork.
What'd the call come over as?
Well, initially I was dispatched to what came out as a fire assist down in District 5. For reference, we divide the city into different districts and assign a patrol officer to each district. So District 5 is anything south of Baseline Road and west of 28th Street.
Where were you when you got the fire assist call?
I was at the annex downtown.
So what'd you do?
Got into my patrol car, which was parked up front. Started making my way through the downtown area, the Pearl Street area, making my way towards Broadway, which is what I was going to take south to get down to District 5.
And what is District 5?
What is it?
Yes. Like what area does that include? Just roughly.
Oh, as I mentioned, it's west of 28th Street and south of Baseline Road.
Okay. And as you were heading there, did you get another radio call?
Yes.
What did that call come over as?
Came over as a shooting.
And do you recall the details that you received over the radio initially and then on your way there?
Some, yes.
What details do you recall?
So I recall a description, as is normally aired on a call. And at some point during the airing of that call, the dispatcher that was on our main radio channel clarified that it was going to be an active shooter.
Where?
The King Soopers supermarket on Table Mesa Boulevard.
So what'd you do then?
Drove a little faster. Activated my overhead lights and emergency sirens, and accelerated down Broadway straight south, which is the direction I was heading anyway.
And when you activate your lights and sirens, does that also activate your body worn camera?
Yes.
And you're aware that it recorded that day?
Yes.
Okay. What was the description of the shooter that you received over the radio on the way to King Soopers?
What I recall was a white male with a beard, and then he was wearing a vest. Came over as tack vest.
What do you mean by tack vest?
Comes in a number of varieties, but it would similar to what you would see a police officer wear, maybe an outer carry or something like that, some sort of, they call it a tactical vest, but it serves some sort of utility. You can put equipment in it, things like that. Possibly some protective equipment, a plate, body armor, stuff like that.
What was going through your mind as you were driving there, Officer Capobianco?
Just getting there as fast as I could. Generally, when I go en route to a call, I safely as I can, I try to read call notes to get a little bit of context so I know what I'm going into. Given the situation, I knew all I needed to at that moment in time, and I was just concentrating on getting there safely just due to the increased speed. So
What do you mean you knew everything you needed to know at that moment in time?
I have a active shooter. I have a description. That's all I needed to know at the time, at least for my purposes, until I got to the call and reassessed.
How'd you get there?
I mean, what route?
Yes, please.
So I was at roughly Broadway and Pearl when I recall the being broken from my initial call to go to the active shooter. So I took Broadway all the way south. Broadway is a straight shot down to Table Mesa. So I took Broadway all the way south, and then I went west, made a right turn and went west on Table Mesa, and the King Supers is right there.
You touched on this, but how would you describe your driving on the way there?
I hesitate to use the word frantic, but your foot gets a little heavier when you're going to a call like that. So generally, we're running emergency lights and sirens. We're going as fast as I safely could, I would say.
On the way there, were you continuing to receive radio transmissions from dispatch about what was going on inside King Supers at that moment?
Honestly, I don't recall. After the initial dispatch, I think I was so focused on getting there, and a lot of things are kind of running through your head at that moment in time. So I couldn't say for sure.
Okay. And if you had received additional radio communications, would that have been captured on your body-worn camera?
As long as my in-car radio was on and audible, then yes.
Okay. And was there an officer who arrived just before you at King Supers?
There was an officer on scene when I arrived.
Who was that?
Officer Gignac.
Had you worked with her before?
Yes.
And did you receive any radio communication from her on the way to King Supers?
Not that I recall.
Do you recall receiving any transmission about two parties down outside the King Supers?
Again, from memory, I can't recall.
Okay. Approximately what time did you arrive?
It was probably somewhere around, I would be guessing, but it probably would have only taken me a few minutes to get down from downtown, given the rate of speed I was going. So maybe 5 or 10 minutes, but again, best guess.
And upon arriving, can you describe for the jury what you saw?
Sure. I pulled into the driveway on the easternmost side of the store. The first driveway off of Table Mesa that leads straight up to the front doors. I saw Officer Gignac closer to the store. I don't recall if I saw anybody running. I expected to see more people outside, but didn't think about it, I guess, at the time. So I pulled in and immediately got out of my car, as we're trained to.
You mentioned as you're trained to, have you had before this incident active shooter training at the Boulder Police Department?
Yes.
What did that consist of?
Simulated drills that we run. Obviously, we do the best we can as far as realism. But they're basically simulated scenarios that we run through. We go over tactics. We try to simulate some level of stress.
And through your training, what were you taught to do when there's an active shooter inside a location?
So, well, there's a lot of things. Getting out of the car as fast as possible. I usually carry a patrol rifle in the trunk of my car, so I went and got that as fast as I could. Another thing that we're taught to do is to listen for stimulus. So what that essentially means is any sort of sound outside of the ordinary, a gunshot, a scream, something like that. And the reason we're taught to do that is because we don't necessarily know what's going on or what we're just arriving into the middle of. But things like that sort of give us an inkling of which direction we're supposed to go, at least.
And when you arrived at King Soopers, what else did you observe outside the store that was of significance to you?
There were, well, the parking lot was, from what I recall, full of cars. As I was running up to the store, I saw a woman, I believe, laying in the parking lot. She wasn't moving. So I kept moving past her to get up to where Officer Gignac was, towards the front of the store.
And you were carrying your rifle at that point?
I was.
And what did you decide to do at that moment?
Well, there was a male who I believe was an employee, just because of the apron that he was wearing, and he was leaving the store. He was heading out east, I believe. And I remember him saying that the shooter was inside. I asked the gentleman where inside. He didn't know. So I quickly moved on from him. He didn't have any further purpose for me.
What doors did you head towards?
They would be the doors on the easternmost side of the store, at least at the time, the layout.
And what was the reason you were going into the store at that moment so soon after arriving?
Generally, short of any stimulus, we tend to slow things down and do a more methodical search. However, I assumed at that point that there were more people inside of the store, and I didn't hesitate to go in, because if there were people inside of the store, then that's where we needed to be. So that's just what I assumed.
What led you to make that assumption?
The parking lot was full. I didn't see, as I mentioned, a lot of people outside in the parking lot running. It's just one of those things. I just assumed there were more people possibly hiding inside of the store, and I just didn't want to wait. So,
And what was the reason you didn't want to wait?
because I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I was outside when another gunshot went off. So, yeah.
What doors did you start to go through?
So there's concrete steps leading up to a glass vestibule. They're automatic glass sliding doors. After that vestibule leads into the store. So we made our way up to that initial vestibule.
And who was it at that point in time?
Initially, it was myself and Officer Gignac.
Did you then hear someone else's voice on the radio?
I did.
Whose voice did you hear?
Officer Talley.
Did you recognize it to be Officer Talley?
I did.
What do you recall him saying over the radio?
I don't remember his exact words, but I remember him airing that he was with us. I remember hearing his radio number, his voice. I recognized. I'd worked with Eric, with Officer Talley, for a while.
So just taking a step back for a minute, when you've worked with someone for a while, do you get to know their voice over the radio like someone might over a cell phone or a phone when they were talking to someone they've known for a long time?
Usually.
And you knew it to be Officer Talley?
I did.
And you also knew that to be his unique Boulder Police Department number that he gave in the radio call?
Yep, I did.
Did you then see Officer Talley join you?
I don't recall seeing him joining us at the time. I believe he was behind me.
And you now know that he was behind you at that point?
Yes.
Can you walk the jury through what happened next?
Yeah, I can. We entered into the vestibule and eventually through the next set of sliding doors, which leads into the store. I remember it being quiet for the most part, some light, I guess you can call it like lounge elevator sort of type music. I remember I could smell vividly, and if you've ever been to a firing range, you know distinctly what gunpowder smells like. And I remember that vividly, that I smelled gunpowder, and that's how I knew that shots had been fired. It's distinct. Inside the store, there are, you walk in, at least from those doors, and there's registers to the right. And I recall seeing another party down towards those registers. Again, didn't notice any movement at that time.
Can I stop here for a minute?
Yes.
When you entered the store, what was the lighting like inside the store?
I guess not out of the ordinary. It was fairly bright, as any supermarket would be under normal operating hours.
You mentioned the music was playing.
I recall it was soft. It was quiet.
Other than the music playing, could you hear any other sounds from within the store?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So in other words, no stimulus that you could perceive.
Correct.
What was your reaction in that moment in time to not being able to perceive any other stimulus?
I'll try to use appropriate words. I almost,
If you need to, the last witness said a few words that you might not find appropriate, so I think we're ready for it.
it's kind of an oh shit moment, because whenever I would train, we would include something like that. That's kind of the signal about, okay, I hear something over there. That's where I'm going to go. I didn't hear anything like that. So I'm basically walking into an open supermarket with no inclination where anybody is. And it was a bit jarring.
You use the word open. How would you describe the amount of cover from like a police officer's perspective? How much cover is there when you're walking in those doors?
Not nearly enough, in my opinion. We use the terms cover and concealment. Cover would be like hiding behind a car, or something that would, in theory, stop a projectile, and then concealment would be hiding behind a bush or something like that that just conceals your location. I remember there being a couple of racks of little tchotchkes or knickknacks or what have you. Otherwise, there was a customer service desk to the left, which provided a bit, but nothing from off to my right side. So I was open to about half the store, roughly, more than I would have liked to have been, but that's what was in front of us.
And then you mentioned just a few moments ago, there was a party down. What does that mean?
Just what it sounds like. We don't know status. I know that there was a party, human down near the registers. They were not moving. I did not know their status at that time. Again, that is, we're trained to stop the threat first and then provide medical aid. So that's what we did. I tried to do.
So you see the person down and you're trained not to render medical aid right in that moment, but to, as you said,